My nephew is a kleptomaniac and keeps stealing from me. I contacted the police and my sister and brother-in-law are furious. About midway last week when I came home from work I noticed my shed door was open and the padlock that I used to keep it shut was broken. And I had a lot of bags full of soda cans in there. My friends and I tend to drink a lot of soda, so I've built up a lot of cans over the course of about a year. And I was going to cash them in at the bottle drop soon because I like big payouts. But there was more than just my bags of cans missing from the shed too. They took my gardening shears, a steel rake, 2 shovels, a full 2-gallon gas can, a brand new power drill, an electric hedge trimmer, and a small electric chainsaw, and a machete. I checked my camera footage and there were my 3 nephews, ages 16, 15, and 14, breaking into my shed with one of their dad's large claw hammers. I recognized the hammer because it's bright yellow and black, and their dad has a bunch of them. It only took them a few hits to smash that cheap lock. After they first broke into my shed, they took what they could by hand. And then they came back with some shopping carts that I'm guessing they also stole. But it took them a few trips to get all of the cans. And they didn't bother to even try and close the door when they were done. My sister and brother-in-law first denied their kids stole anything from me. So I went to their house and showed them the security footage from my cameras. I'd not told them I'd had cameras installed. And the reason I had the cameras put in was because of prior thefts by my nephews. It started with food and snacks. And then moved on to DVDs and video games. Then pretty much anything they thought they could smuggle out after that. And any time I made them return stuff they'd stolen from me, I was treated like the bad guy and then got the fakest apologies I've ever heard. And they never got in much trouble from their parents either. The final straw happened last year when my nephews broke into my house and stole 3 6-packs of my favorite beer from my fridge. They used my hidden spare key to get in, and also took a huge dump in one of my bathrooms and not only didn't flush, but also peed all over the floor. And I'm pretty sure it was intentional. The beer they stole was hidden in one of their bedrooms when I confronted my sister and brother-in-law about my nephews stealing it. And I was basically given an equivalent to boys will be boys when I wanted them punished. So I had the cameras put in and told no one. Which was a smart move. When my sister and brother-in-law saw the camera footage of my nephews stealing from me, they seemed furious. But they were actually madder that their boys skipped school to steal from me. They'd spent all day making repeated trips to the bottle drop and cashing the cans by machine. The bottle drop also pays by machine. So they just kept bringing the cans until they cashed them all. And then they bought video games and junk food with the money. Said money actually amounted to nearly $300. With that and the destroyed padlock I told my sister and brother-in-law that they now owed me $300. My sister and brother-in-law went from being angry at their kids to making excuses for them, and then being angry at me for wanting that money back when I know they have 3 kids and a mortgage. I said it was either that or I would go to the police and press charges. They told me to get out, and I said they have 2 days to decide how to pay me back before I go to the cops. I got back everything else my nephew stole, machete and gas can included. Though they'd already used the gas for something. But over the next couple of days my sister and brother-in-law were blowing up my phone with a ton of messages. Both verbal and text. At first they were calling me heartless because it was right after the holidays and they have 3 kids and a mortgage. Then they started gaslighting me. Then even threatening me. And all of this would go in a repeating cycle. My nephews chimed in from another cell phone and were sending me lots of messages of their own. Which were more fake apologies and gaslighting. My eldest nephew even sent me a picture of himself holding a soda can and giving me the middle finger. So I guess they weren't taking my threats of going to the police seriously because family. When I last spoke with my sister and brother-in-law, they refused to negotiate any sort of method of repayment for what my nephews did. Even when I suggested they just sell the video games that were purchased with the money from the cans. Then they had the audacity to say I'd actually tempted my nephews by having the cans in my shed to begin with. Oh yes, I'm the devil snake that tempted my nephews with a shed full of cans that just screamed money money money. So that was it. I went to the police station that morning and filed a report. Gave them a copy of the video footage of my nephews stealing from my shed. I gave them the broken lock they smashed. Showed them all of the texts, which were screenshotted and also given as evidence. I even gave them a copy of the photo my eldest nephew sent me of him flipping me off. I did tell the police that I found it worrisome that my nephews had taken the machete. But they classified it as a tool. Especially since they took a lot of other actual tools. So fair enough on that I suppose. But my nephews were indeed arrested on Saturday. Police came to their house and my sister and brother-in-law were forced to let them in because they had a warrant. Apparently all 3 of my nephews went from being cocky little jerks to crying like babies when they were being put in cuffs. I know this because a neighbor I'm acquainted with that sort of friends with my sister was there to see it. And shortly after the arrest my sister and brother-in-law were blowing up my phone again. They weren't able to get their kids out of jail till Monday morning. And now the boys are being charged with larceny, willful destruction of property and vandalism, and harassment. The police took this whole case pretty seriously as there has been complaints about my nephews for some time. But nothing was proven until now. The past few months bags of cans have actually been going missing all over the area. Don't know if it was my nephews or not. But they're likely suspects. And with word spreading of their arrest, let's hope other neighbors with security cameras come forward with more footage. My sister and brother-in-law showed up at my house too. I refused to open the door and told them that this all happened because they are enablers who refuse to hold their kids accountable for their actions. That made them just scream and pound on my door more till I threatened to call the police on them too. And since I've done it already, they know I mean it now. So they left without any more trouble. But they went back to blowing up my phone. I didn't block my sister or brother-in-law. Instead, I decided to just save all of the messages they send me because I've made the decision to take them to small claims court over this. I don't really need or want the money, and have already replaced the destroyed padlock with a much better one. However, the kids aren't the only ones who need to be taught a lesson. In the end, I hope I put them in enough of a hole that they learn not to screw with me ever again. I also have the full support of my family on this. I'm going to push for my nephews to get community service. And the reason why isn't just because it's a good idea, but also because I know that they'll hate that the most. Whenever they are made to do any kind of work they don't want to do, they just stand around griping and act like the whole world is against them. My nephew is a kleptomaniac and keeps stealing from me. I contacted the police and my sister and brother-in-law are furious. I figured that my sister and brother-in-law were going to dig their heels in even deeper after the crap that's already gone down. But they actually caved. I filed a lawsuit against them in small claims for the actions of their kids. In the suit I was asking for $500. This was for the stolen cans, the destroyed lock, the cost of the replacement lock, the cost of filing with the courts, and emotional damages for the harassment. A friend whose father is a lawyer gave me a free consultation and said I have a very strong case because of the camera footage I have of both my nephews stealing from me, and of my sister and brother-in-law pounding on my front door. Plus all of the messages they sent me. When my sister and brother-in-law were served, they called me freaking out. They said I couldn't do this to them. So I retorted that this is the price they are paying for not parenting their kids and letting them become entitled little thieves. And if they wish to speak to me again, it will either be when I see them in court, or if they decide to pay me the $500 I'm suing for. Then I hung up on them. Well, yesterday evening I was having some friends over after work, but then I got a knock at the door. When I looked outside, there was my sister and brother-in-law. And they looked very unhappy. I opened the door, but left the screen door shut. Then asked them what they were doing at my house. They told me that they're tired of fighting because everyone is against them. And fully admitted how badly they effed up by letting this go as far as they did. And just wanted to make peace. Brother-in-law then slid an envelope through a crack in the door that contained $500 in $50 bills. He said it was from his private savings account. Then told me from now on they'll make sure my nephews are duly punished for their actions. They didn't ask me to drop the charges, but pleaded with me to at least be lenient. I said I was only pushing for community service, which is pretty lenient. And if we cooperate for that, then hopefully the judge will agree. They sighed and said they'd cooperate if that's all I wanted. Then left without making any sort of a fuss. My friends all congratulated me on holding my ground. Others in my family later did the same. That's when I found out from my parents that they actually threatened to disown my sister if she and her husband didn't make some changes for the better. So now they are. It may be a forced change, but it's the best we'll probably see out of them. My mom paid my sister and brother-in-law a visit after they repaid me too. She told me that my nephews were not playing video games. In fact, every single video game related thing was put away somewhere. And so was the TV that my nephews would game and watch movies on. All three nephews were in their rooms most of the time. And were very rude and unwelcoming to their grandmother. But my sister claims they are dealing with the situation. So yeah, I've dropped the lawsuit now that I've been paid what I wanted. But my nephews are still going to court for theft. Update 2, my nephew is a kleptomaniac and keeps stealing from me. I contacted the police and my sister and brother-in-law are furious. My nephews went to court for theft and were handed 100 hours of community service. I thought all was settled after my sister and brother-in-law promised to do a better job at parenting them, but my eldest nephew had different ideas. During the 100 hours of community service, he got into screaming matches with everyone who told him to work. His father had to be called over just to make the boy pick up a rake. The kid openly blamed me for his predicament, and his brothers were both initially on his side. But after a while they realized that he's just crazy and entitled, and they no longer want any part of it. A few days later, in the middle of the night, my eldest nephew sneaked out and assaulted my house with a pair of his dad's claw hammers. I say a pair because he literally had one in each hand. The first thing he did was start smashing the new lock on my shed, and it didn't break. But he heavily damaged it to the point it was no longer usable and I had to later remove it with bolt cutters. He also did a lot of damage to the shed door with the hammer's claws. I awoke to the sounds of the hammers, and called the police after peeking out my bedroom window and seeing someone outside hitting the shed. Though I didn't realize it was him at first because he had his face covered with a creepy-looking mask. He saw the bedroom lights come on and chucked one of the hammers through my window. There was broken glass everywhere, and I'm lucky I didn't cut my feet on any of it because I was barefoot. Then my nephew started beating on my back door with the remaining hammer. He did major damage breaking the knob and the window on the door, and also tore into the door itself with the hammer claw. I was worried the door wouldn't hold out, so I yelled that the police were on their way, and he took off before they arrived. The night vision on my camera showed it was him. He had a mask on, but was wearing his school hoodie, as well as his Nike shoes that were also pretty identifiable since his brothers don't have a pair like them. His fingerprints were also on the hammer he threw at my window. My nephews had already all been fingerprinted when they were arrested the first time. So police matched the ones on the hammer to him. When the cops came for my eldest nephew, he obviously denied it was him. But there's no one else it could have been. The other hammer was found in his room, along with the clothes and mask he wore. All of which were taken as evidence. The mask was of a Star Wars character I was told is called the Grand Inquisitor. This time though, his parents did nothing to try and protect him. And they didn't try to pass the blame on me either. They just let their son be taken away screaming. I wasn't there to see the arrest. But I was told by my sister that my eldest nephew was switching back and forth from crying that he didn't do anything wrong, to screaming that it was all my fault and he had to get back at me. The boy had to go through a serious mental evaluation, and was found to be potentially bipolar. Later on, when he was properly diagnosed as bipolar, he started blaming everything he did wrong on that. And acted like he should be vilified just for getting treatment for it. But he ended up having a month-long stint in juvenile hall. They got my nephew properly medicated, and he pleaded guilty to forego court again in exchange for more community service and mandatory counseling, as well as probation this time. His dad came to my house and personally replaced the broken window and door. Though he barely said a word to me while doing it. My two younger nephews are still excluding their older brother from pretty much everything. And he still hasn't apologized for attacking my home either. He's also unfortunately repeating a school year because of how badly his grades tanked. Which his parents are still very unhappy about. My two younger nephews dropped by on their own in July to personally apologize to me. They said that they always just follow their brother's lead, and he made everything they were doing seem so fun. But the punishments for the crimes are not worth the kind of fun they were having. And they don't want anything to do with it anymore. They want their fun uncle back and asked if we could start over. I said we can, but they'll have to earn back my trust. Which they happily agreed to. My eldest nephew had his 17th birthday a few months ago, and basically got nothing. Not even a cake. Meanwhile, my youngest nephew had his birthday a month after that, and got a new mountain bike among his gifts. This really upset my eldest nephew, and he slashed the tires on the bike with a kitchen knife. Which landed him in even more trouble. I know a thing or two about fixing bikes, so I went out and bought new tubes and tires for the bike, and put them on it. So the bike is fine, and my nephew thanked me a lot for fixing it. My eldest nephew resorted to trying to run away because he wasn't being enabled anymore. He just walked out, got on his bike with a backpack full of stuff, and rode off. His parents quickly reported him missing because he left a goodbye letter that basically blamed me and his bipolar for all his problems. In the letter he stated that he can't wait till he's 18 to get away from us all. So he was doing us a favor by getting rid of himself sooner. But he came back 3 days later without his bike or backpack, and looking beat up. He wouldn't tell anyone what happened. We still don't know. But he was chewed out for continuously using me as a scapegoat for his personal issues, because blaming me was the first thing he did after he got back. I didn't make him steal from me, I didn't make him attack my house, I didn't make him run away. That was all him. And he nearly ended up back in juvie for running off because he violated his probation. But he got off easy somehow. Currently he spends his days pretty much in his room when not in school, or doing chores, or going to counseling. His probation will last till he's 18. Everyone in the family has outcast him, nobody wants him in their home, and I am told he gets bullied at school and is awfully quiet in it. The Daily also plans to exclude him from Thanksgiving and Christmas. I can't stand him, so I don't care too much. Update 3, my nephew is a kleptomaniac and keeps stealing from me. I contacted the police and my sister and brother-in-law are furious. I was hoping things would get better, but instead they went downhill. Last year my sister and brother-in-law went to Thanksgiving at brother-in-law's parents' house instead of with my parents. Somehow they managed to have the eldest nephew invited, who wasn't exactly on his best behavior over there. My sister and brother-in-law had a long talk with our parents about how excluding my nephew would not help his mental state at the moment. My parents relented and let him come to Christmas Eve. I of course got him a gift. But because I wanted to help him mentally get better, in early December I went out and bought him a used metallic green mountain bike at the local second-hand store. It needed a little bit of work, but was an excellent buy for $30. I also learned that since his good backpack was stolen, he was using an old one that belonged to one of his brothers. So I grabbed a used one at the same second-hand store for about $5. I fixed up the bike and washed the backpack, and when I presented them both to him on a Sunday, he seemed completely shocked I'd give him anything. And it also made him really awkward. But he took them both with a look that said thanks and started using them right away to go to and from school like he did with his old bike and backpack. My sister and brother-in-law were also pretty damn shocked I gave him gifts, let alone replace the stuff that was stolen from him when he ran away after he attacked my house with hammers. But the gifts had the effect I was hoping for. I was no longer the object of his rage. He really had been looking for any excuse to make me out to be the vile snake that ruined his life. But I'm not. When I next saw him, it was at the family Christmas Eve party. And while there, my sister and brother-in-law made him apologize for putting all his anger on me. They loomed over him like shadows while he talked to me. He was told to look me in the eye repeatedly. And in his apology, he admitted that it wasn't my fault he was arrested. He egged me on, he stole from me, and he damaged my property. And he won't do it again. We shook hands and he didn't make any trouble at the party at all. But his parents were like his shadows that entire evening. They didn't leave him alone at all. They might as well have had him on a leash. It was awkward, but I can understand why. They'd put a lot on the line just so he could be allowed to come to Christmas. At New Year's though, things took a dive. My eldest nephew stole a bottle of champagne from his parents and drank it all fast while locked in the bathroom before anyone could stop him. He'd asked for a drink of it prior, and was told he was too young. So he stole one of the bottles and chugged it. We didn't know this until then, but apparently he'd been stealing alcohol for some time before his first arrest. And he kept a hidden stash somewhere that slowly ran out as he only touched it little by little, and even sold some of it to other kids in the neighborhood. He didn't get in massive trouble. Just got sent to his room for the night after he said he stole the booze because he was just really craving it, and it was New Year's. His brothers admitted to their parents about his stash, and showed them where it was hidden. It was a plastic tub in the crawlspace under the house. When confronted about how they got all the alcohol, my two younger nephews admitted to following their brother's lead, and only stole like only one beer at a time, or poured some hard alcohol from its original bottle into another bottle little by little. And then the biggest bomb. They had been sneaking into other people's houses and doing the same thing all over the neighborhood. Their way of breaking in was to look for unlocked doors and windows, no houses with dogs because they'd bark, and the youngest would crawl in through windows because he was the smallest. And then he'd unlock the doors to let his brothers in. They made sure not to steal anything big from inside the houses, so they could come back multiple times. But after they got arrested last year, they realized they didn't enjoy being thieves anymore. And were just following their brother's lead, like they'd said before. Of course the kids were in trouble for not admitting any of that until then. And despite trying to keep it secret, word still got around somehow. It confirmed some of the suspicions of the neighbors. Considering how good my nephews were at being cat burglars, you'd think they'd have been more mindful of cameras. Or perhaps they just figured I would never get cameras. But after my nephews were exposed as thieves, a few of my and my sister's neighbors got cameras too. The punishment for admitting how they stole stuff was minor for my nephews. It was kinda redundant for the eldest because he's still in trouble with being on probation and whatnot. And he hadn't tried to steal anything else until he took the bottle of champagne. My brother-in-law started giving him lots of mint gum to chew to help with his cravings, because it was what he used to help cut back on drinking himself. And it kinda helped. Brother-in-law also started keeping all his booze locked in a padlocked fridge in the garage. He suspects his son tried to get into it once. All of that aside, things didn't seem so bad until my eldest nephew got in a fight at school in February. I'm told he didn't start it. But another kid picked on him until they started swinging fists. The nephew lost his 2 front teeth when he got his face slammed into a locker. There ended up being a reason for this attack. My younger nephews told me their older brother had a number of targets to pick on at school before getting arrested. He was apparently the typical bully people picture when they think of one. He stole things from other kids, aimed for the small and the weak, smacked them around when no one was looking, and on more than one occasion slashed bike tires. Well, the big brother of a kid he'd previously picked on went after him. And that boy messed him up. Both of his top front teeth were out, and his nose was broken. He had to be taken to the hospital, and an emergency surgeon had to put his teeth back in. Which also required special braces to hold them in place. His nose also had to be reset, and he was put in a neck brace. The poor boy didn't want to be seen by anyone for months. No one pressed charges. Believe me, I've asked many times as to why not. But the other kid's parents paid at least half of the cost for my nephew's treatments for his teeth and nose through their insurance. My sister and brother-in-law's health insurance sucked for covering the rest though, and they had a high copay. They didn't bother to file anything because they didn't want to be in court again, and the other parents only paid as much as they did because they didn't want to be sued. I contributed a bit to the cost too. I still had the $500 they'd given me in cash after I sued them, and decided to give it back to them to help ease the cost a little. When I saw my nephew after the incident, his face was messed up, and his front teeth were wired in place. He refused to return to school and did all his remaining lessons online with a school-provided laptop. The boy who hurt him, I was told, received nothing more than a 2-week suspension. I won't deny I was upset. But at the same time, I know this only happened because my nephew was a bully to other kids. What goes around, does still eventually come around.